Hello, bronies. It's me, Clayton. I just got out of seeing the most recent My Little Pony episode, Daring Don't. Now, I do wonder why the release schedule is so messed up when it comes to this season, because we've gone certain weeks without any My Little Pony episodes, and then we've gone some weeks where some episodes have been released days in advance. But enough about that. When it comes to the Daring Do episodes, I initially didn't like the plot twist that A.K Yearling is Daring Do when I saw, I believe, season 4 when that episode came out. But ever since then, the entire concept of Daring Do being a real character in the universe has grown on me, especially ever since a certain episode in season 5. So when it comes to the plot of this episode, I actually did enjoy it as a Indiana Jones style adventure done with a completely new twist that makes me think about a lot of adventure stories that I read nowadays. Let's get to the story, shall we? The story is that A.K Yearling, the author who created the Daring Do books that actually is Daring Do, is retiring, and Rainbow Dash as well as Pinkie Pie go over to her house to see why that's happening. It turns out that A.K Yearling has been blamed for various acts of property damage and theft in the southern part of Equestria, which is apparently based on ancient Egypt. So, Rainbow Dash and Pinkie Pie decide to go with A.K Yearling to go over to that part of Equestria to clear Daring Do's name and to make sure that everyone knows that she's a hero and not a villain. So when it comes to the story of this episode, it actually is interesting considering instead of a swashbuckling, non-stop action adventure like some of the other Daring Do stories, it actually does touch on a subject that I've been thinking about with a lot of hero stories. You know how heroes in movies and TV shows tend to do whatever it takes to capture the villain, but in doing so they do certain things that could get them in a lot of trouble, like property damage or disrespecting others, or just having a success but at a cost. This episode talks about that cost and whether the people will appreciate the hero for getting the job done, or whether they'll just focus on the fact that there's a lot of property damage and sometimes maybe the hero pulled off some things that weren't entirely heroic while they were doing it, even if the non-heroic things that happened were not Daring Do's fault in this case. It's an interesting setup that pretty much lets you know that if you do something bad, you got to take responsibility for it, even if what you were doing was for the right reasons. Responsibility always matters when it comes to this sort of stuff. This episode was written by G.M. Barrow, who you might know as the woman who makes the My Little Pony chapter books. And naturally, as someone who makes chapter books based on the series, she gets these characters down very, very well. As Rainbow Dash, Pinkie Pie, and Yearling feel consistent with how they've been portrayed throughout the series, and it does feel like a story that could happen in Season 7, considering how things have developed over the time. The Egypt-like location they go to is actually pretty cool, since it even has a legend about a certain pony in that region who's immortalized in a statue. And I'll admit, seeing that story play out in what looks like Egyptian hieroglyphs is actually pretty interesting. The one thing that I do like about the series is when it goes for exposition about a certain pony and a story about that said pony, or other person, it happens to tell that story with a unique art style. Sometimes Pinkie does it with felt art. Sometimes the ponies tell each other stories via storybooks, and this one is done with Egyptian hieroglyphs. It's a minor thing, but it does add a lot to the style and enjoyment of the episode. Now, the ending of the episode is pretty predictable, especially when it turns out who's the person who ended up framing Daring Do for all this stuff, especially if you've seen the previous Daring Do episodes. You'll probably like, gee, I wonder who did it. Oh yeah, it's that guy. But to be fair, the Daring Do stories have always managed to pull off predictable stories in a decent manner. And this one's exactly that. It's a decently told story that is predictable, but at the same time enjoyable. So I'll give Daring Done an 8 out of 10. See you next time.